And you talked earlier about the concept of having a not a CV.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of tools or tricks you use to help people share their inner self a bit more within the organisation?
Yeah, and that's following Juergen, what you said, where it's really boring to hear people talk about their qualifications and experience. Nobody really wants to hear your last 25 years of what you've done. So there's a couple of things I think, like I said, in a rebel, we asked them to answer a question, how do you unleash it in a rebel? But then I saw this other tool, which I cannot take credit for, and I hopefully can put it in the show notes. It's a form that leaders are now asking. It's like a table, really, where you're asking your team to talk about their own personal things. So, for example, it'll be like, what are your working hours? What do you like doing? And so you might, rather than going 9-5, you might go, do you know what? I'm not very productive between the hours of 8 and 11. So if you want me to be creative, it's best for you to best to invite me to a creative meeting between 1 and 3. Or I like to go for a run at lunchtime. So if you invite me to any meetings between 12 and 1, I won't respond because I'm going for a run. That's really important to me. And there's different things like that within this form that you fill in. And it's really powerful. When you get to know your team much more than you would if you were just having a general conversation. And in the world of hybrid, which is what we're in right now, even more critical that you get to know those folks who may be at-home workers more frequently than coming into the office. And as leaders, and especially when it comes to inclusion and belonging, we do need to put ourselves out there more than we've ever have done so. Yeah. We don't have the privilege anymore of overhearing conversations between teammates who may be struggling, or somebody tapping you on the shoulder while you're sat there and saying, "Can I have a quick word?" And now people feel like you're intruding in someone's time if you're not in the same space. So you have to put a meeting in. Can I have 20 minutes? So let's put a Teams meeting in, rather than it being a really kind of informal, while you're here, while you're making a coffee, can we have a quick chat? That doesn't happen now with this kind of, and even when you are going into the office, you're there with a purpose. I've got a few meetings, I need to get stuff done, I need to go home.
That's it. And the meeting's an agenda, it's formal, it's production, it's work. Yeah. It's not the subtle nuances, the personal conversations, is it?
No, and you miss that. And the people I've spoken to are missing that. They're missing that connection. It was all quite a nice environment, I suppose, to an extent, when you were allowed to work from home more than frequently. But I'm seeing more and more people now going, do you know what, I'm a bit lonely now.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we've seen just looking at statistics, we've seen a huge increase in usage of our platforms over the last 2 years, like a huge increase, not just accountable for the odd bit of homeworking or whatever else. It's just that really heightened need to communicate with the fellow man, kind of. You don't have that
person.
You don't. Yeah. Apologies. You're quite right. But and I think the other thing is that, gosh, you've lost my thread.
Sorry.
Well, I tell you, let me use, because I think you were just going somewhere very interesting, which is, can your engagement tools, platforms that you're building, can they become a space for that more informal communication? Because that's can they become can on your platform there be the coffee machine?
Absolutely.
And go to the coffee machine and have your coffee machine conversation.
It's those type of things that are happening, absolutely, because as you say, the productivity tools of business, the Teams, the Zooms, they're not really there for that reason. They don't foster that personalized engagement opportunity. And I think I've got an interesting debate as well at the moment, which I think many business leaders have, which is the purpose of the office. Because I read a report a couple of weeks ago that the average number of time people are coming into the city centre of Manchester, which is where we are now, is 1.5 days a week.
Wow.
Which is, and I think the general consensus is that now that's the new normal, right? That's not really going to change. So the big question for me in my business, and I think everyone else's, is, well, then if everyone's only coming into the office for 1 or 1.5 days a week, what is the purpose of the office? And picking up on these sorts of requirements to get social engagement going. And I've got a theory that we need to be bold enough to start throwing the desks out of the window and having environments more like where we're sat now, because of this type of conversation, which is what people will get from coming to the office, not sat at a desk working.
I agree.
Yeah, but how do you make that work? And by the way, I totally agree with you. As a matter of fact, I think we should go as far as just ditching the word office.
I agree. I agree.
I think office is dead.
It's a home,
and we've now got a collaboration space. That collab Right, there you are. I've just come up with a name. We're now working in collabs.
Collabs, yeah.
That's where we are. Now having said that, and I'm certainly guilty of it. When I go to a collab, right? I'm not going to the office. I'm going to the collab now. I am a sort of a productivity person. So I'm now going there, and I'd feel guilty, to just go and have a cup of coffee, because I've gone there to do something. So I've gone to have a meeting. But how do we, how do we create that culture? And, and I remember at Siemens, we created all these areas with bean bags and that, and then you walk past, nobody ever used them, but how do we?
Because I think back then the culture wasn't like it is now.
Right.
The landscape's changed, right?
Yeah.
So I think you were right. You went to the office to be productive. It was like the factory, wasn't it? You all sat there doing emails for 12 hours in the day, right? And that's your classic office environment. But I think now that people are doing that in the comfort of their own home and then coming in for 1 day a week, they don't need to do that for that 1 day a week.
Yeah, and that's it, so that's the whole mind. It needs a completely.
It does a complete reframing.
It does, and it needs someone to lead. Like again, we go back to that leading by example. So if you are going to the office and you're sitting on Teams all day, then it's not productive at all. But people will say, well, I can sit on Teams all day
it's
at home.
Pointless, yeah.
Pointless, but it is around, if you think, I don't know if you've heard of the culture specialist, Edgar Schein, and he talks about, symbolism, symbols, then he talks about the values, and then he talks about basic assumptions, and that's what basically makes a culture. I've really simplified his 30 years of work, but you get the gist. Yeah. And it's the symbols that, are the kind of the first impressions you have of a culture. And those beanbags and the ping pong table and all those things that may have been very beneficial in those days to show that you've got quite a fun, vibrant culture. If your behaviours are not showing that it is, your values and your behaviours are not demonstrating you've got a fun culture, those beanbags and ping pong tables are just symbolisms that don't exist. People can see
the meaning.
It's inauthentic. It doesn't work. So if you are creating this collab space now, then you have to be intentional. You have to lead by example. So if you're a leader or you're a manager of a team, take the leap yourself and encourage people and do it, and go and sit in a space like this and say, come over here and let's have a chat. Let's see how you're getting on, and give them that permission to get off the computer. And if they say, I've got too much going on, go out, okay, let's have a chat about what you've got going on. Yeah. Let's have and opening that two-way conversation.
I didn't understand that.
Oh.
No, not many people will.
That was the world of technology, and my watch just speaking to me.
Are you seeing that, Yves? It's fascinating insight there, because you. That's brilliant.
I didn't understand.
Right at that moment as well. I didn't understand what you're saying.
Juergen's watch didn't understand anything.
I did understand that, Advita, just to be clear.
But are you seeing that businesses are looking for this insight, or are they just running blind to what's been in the past and not being innovative enough to embrace really new ways of kind of making people feel inclusive? Because I think the timing's perfect for it anyway, right? Set aside the COVID thing, I think it's just helped some of the changes happen quicker, right? But really inclusive cultures, it touches on all of these areas, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and I think what's happening is that there's just lots going on, and there's so much noise and distraction and stress for businesses. With all the energy crisis and the rates and people not being able to find people to even work in their organisations, there's so much pressure on leaders now to keep this business thriving that they're forgetting the stuff that can help the organisation thrive and belong and be included, because they're out here trying to fix this, and down there is not, to them, it's not a priority. We need to bring people into the business quickly. We need to bring that talent in, and we need to retain that talent, and we need to support that talent. And if you start talking about, let's create this collab space, let's do this, to them it's like, what are you talking about? I've got all this crazy thing going on here at the moment. It's really, really not where I need to be in my space. So it's difficult to start those conversations, but they need to kind of go back to the basics, in my opinion, and be like, why are people not staying? Why are we not able to attract the talent that we need? And why have we got this kind of fear culture going on right now? And really think about the behaviours. And then again, to the Edgar Schein thing, you've got the symbols, which are great if you can create this, but then what are the behaviours and the values that people are demonstrating?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Behaviours, values. And I think a lot of it is purpose as well, isn't it? Having that real purpose in your organization, and that purpose needs to be something that gets people out of bed in the morning. This is, I'm coming to do some programming and some coding, to make Engage apps work better. That's one thing, but actually, I'm in the market of improving communications and creating better cultures in organizations, through that, creating, making sure people have more fun at work. Now you're into something which is more fun, isn't it?
It is, and it's much more inspirational for you want to be part of, isn't it? Definitely.
And the thing with fun, though, again, it's really subjective, isn't it? Fun. So what I might think is fun and what you might think is fun is very different things. So I always say to folks again is, you need to know your team. You need to understand what they want and have those conversations. And bringing in a comedy actor on Friday, I don't know if anyone does this, but for example, maybe they do. Actually, I have seen people do this on Teams, to bring not everybody's going to love it. There was a laughter specialist who I do know, and he's a great guy, but it's not my thing. And forcing people into forced fun can be uncomfortable. So again, it's those conversations about what do you need from me to help you thrive in this organization? What is missing for you? And how can I help support that? And let's have a conversation around that.
No, I mean, I totally agree with you. And, and we used to do a lot of that sort of forced fun. And look, I'm a bit of an extrovert and, and I'd enjoy those sort of things. But, it did dawn on me eventually that actually this doesn't embrace inclusivity at all. Because in your team, you're bound to have, whatever, 30, 40% of people who are introverts. Yeah. And the last thing they want to do is to come into forced fun and, and then maybe even, suddenly asked, to tell a joke or something, it's the last thing. So, I mean, I'm with you completely. It's not inclusive.
No, and those icebreakers and stuff that we often have are not inclusive. So the last question is like, what was the best holiday you've ever been on? Yeah. And people, I've seen in rooms where people have never been away. Not been able to afford to go away, and then this, not to the blame of the facilitator, they're asking an icebreaker, but the uncomfortableness in some people going, I don't even have a passport, I've never been away, I've never been on holiday, I've not had the opportunity to do so, and it's just been very mindful of some of the questions that we may be asking, and the only way we can be mindful is if we get to know people and be curious about who they are. That's why that that form I was telling you about, if a facilitator handed that out at the start, they could use that as a bit of a game to know each other.
That's a really good idea. It's getting the mechanisms to capture those things and easily share them, so you're then educated and you know about it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I remember talking to someone about the insights. It's the classic Myers-Briggs personality types thing, and they actually used that with customers, and they'd say that they would ask them to fill in a simple questionnaire so they could see whether they were red, green, blue, those classic, people are familiar with that. I think most people are. Yeah. And then if they were someone that was a kind of green, blue, that they loved the detail. If they were a kind of red, yellow, they were strategic visionaries that didn't do details. So if you engaged with them in that manner, they would be more engaged with you than if you gave them a load of detail that they wouldn't read. So it's interesting how far you go, because when you get into a company and you try and implement that at scale, it's really hard. That's the thing. And I think
possibly a bit intrusive as well, right? If you can do that within your team, but I think it has to be done in a sort of quite a controlled environment. That I mean, doing that with your customers is that's quite ambitious.
I mean, even with your team, I think there's I have a problem with those personality tests, because I think they put labels and boxes on people. And I think saying to somebody, because I'm a red yellow, because I've done hundreds of these, she's very creative and can and can be a bit vibrant. When she gets excited about certain things. And so don't give her the detail. But I know myself that there are certain things that I want the detail for. If I'm really interested in certain things that I probably don't need to know. And I've been in organisations, and both of you will probably experience this, is where people define each other by the colours. Oh, they're a red, they're a blue, they're a green. I'm like, the human beings. And they made you put those bricks on your table, right? In the order of the colours that you are. So red, green, yellow, blue, whatever orders that test told you. So everybody had these bricks on their table. So when you went over to that person and you're like, oh, they're a red, oh, better be careful. You kind of started to make this assumption and stereotype them based on their colours. And like, the world isn't complicated enough with all the stereotypes that we put out there. Then you add the colour stuff in it. And I'm like, I understand the purpose sometimes to see whether gaps are in knowledge, or you might want to see if you've got a team that functions well. But I also believe you can do that through conversation.
Yeah.
And by getting to know your team rather than getting to fill in these personality tests, which are often created by privileged people in certain positions who haven't had the insight to certain personalities.
Yeah.
And it's just being mindful. I know loads of people may be listening going, oh God, I've just invested like 20 grand
in that program. Yeah.
It works, but being mindful that you labeling people in that way is not always useful.
It's probably a bit 1980s.
It is very 1980s.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that I'm thinking here is there a counter narrative to this, which is if you're going down this, whichever the mechanism, if it's a Myers-Briggs or whether it's your sheet where you tell me about your inner self.
Yeah.
So I really get to know that you like a certain type of food or a certain type of music. And if in this scenario of a team event, you might ask 50 people, we want to do something as a team. But if you ask them to divulge that level of detail, you'd never organize anything because you can't find any common ground because this person doesn't like music, this person doesn't like drinking, this person doesn't like going out. And you kind of go, actually, are you worse off then? Is there a fear of doing nothing as a result of knowing all of this information?
I think you have to be very mindful that if you try and do everything for everybody, you'll do nothing for no one.
That's it.
And you have to be quite mindful. And it's not about trying, inclusion has elements of exclusion, and it's been okay with that at times. And I think we fear that. And we think to ourselves, oh, we need to include absolutely every single human being in this thing. And sometimes people won't like that. And that's okay, but at least give them a choice. So choices are very important. So if there is a culture of wanting to go, so at the moment I've been having conversations about going for a drink after work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people now more than ever that don't drink or are uncomfortable around drinking and whatever. And I've seen this kind of debate between, well, I like to go to the pub and have a drink, and well, I don't. So what do we do? And I'm like, give them a choice.
Yeah.
Like, go for a dinner. And then if anybody wants to go for a drink afterwards, can do.
Yeah.
Or go bowling or do something like that where it doesn't involve drinking. Because it's not only for religious reasons, people don't drink because of other reasons. And it can be triggering and all sorts. So a very practical example, but give people options and say, do you know what? We want to do a team event. We're going to go bowling, or we're going to go and do a bit of a team activity. Let's do a vote. Majority wins. That's just the world that we live in. And if you want to come along, come. If not, we're going to go for a drink afterwards and join us then. But we are fearful at times of giving people choices, or we don't even think about we need to give a choice. And then we get upset when people say, I don't want to do that. I'm not part of, I don't feel I belong now because you haven't really considered what I want. But you just have to be, if you know your team and you get to know your team and you've built this trust with them, they will know your heart is in the right place by doing the things that you're doing. And next time you might be able to do, if you make a mistake, own it, acknowledge it, take accountability and do it differently next time.
Yeah. So a bit like Liz. Is that a right segue?
Which Liz?
The Liz.
The Liz.
There's only one now, isn't there?
Owning the mistake, pivoting and redoing everything. But no, I think that's really important. And I think that's really good advice as well, like genuinely really good advice. And I think if, as you say, you're never going to please everybody, but if your intention's right and open and transparent, then I think people will get the fact that you are going that little bit of an extra mile to make people feel inclusive, and that's important.
And people will, and not to get political, I know they did a U-turn on the 45p tax thing, but they got attacked for that as well. And they didn't make the right decision, but they got attacked. And he's like, I've heard you, and I get it, and I want to check. But like, you get it, you want to get it in the first place. Like, to your point right at the start of this conversation, if you've not got that cognitive diversity to understand the challenges, which is where the issues are, so no one around that table said, oh, is that the right thing you're doing? Or even if they did think that, they didn't say it, but they still got attacked for it. And this is why people get scared about it.
I often think that, I think U-turns like that should be celebrated, because they are.
They've listened.
It's a listening, it's an admission that I got it wrong. And I think that should be celebrated. So I think, but now we're into a totally different ball game, which is our media and, our media in helping responsible communication, because they create that fear factor, don't they?
Sells papers. Sells it, doesn't it?
And I think you're right, what you touched on earlier, in the sense that the business community could do so much more to kind of level off a lot of that fear mongering that the media loves so much, because like you say, it does sell the papers.
Sells papers. Yeah, they do. And media has always been like, if you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, which they've been doing for the last 20 years, media alongside the government has never been up the trust thing.
Never.
They've always been down there because they are very much about selling papers, and what sells papers is fear. You know, the nice stories are nice to read, but no one's going to buy them.
No.
You know, people want to read about the crises that are going on in the world. And again, with the social media side of things, we hear more than we've ever heard before. You know, humans are not meant to live in a continuous state of stress. And right now, with all the access we've got to all this information, it's great to be knowledgeable, but we are in a continuous state of stress all the time. And it's not healthy. And we need to edit our choices in what we are doing and what we're hearing. And I think sometimes that's maybe to the question earlier on, Juergen, about should leaders contribute? They need to make a decision. Where do I need to contribute? And what value am I bringing? And how do I reassure my people and my team and my customers that we're doing right by them?
Yeah. So on that, you know, maybe just a question to both of you, and because, you know, I think this will be really helpful for our vocal future voices, because they live in that constant state of stress. And actually, you know, many of them, that's, you know, they became into senior leadership positions, you know, 3-4 years ago. All they've known is this uber stressful environment. You know, manage your way through COVID, you know, then manage your way through the energy and cost of living crisis. You know, now managing our way through what is, you know, going to be a recession of forms. You know, so in that environment, what advice do you give to the future voices in terms of them, you know, having an impact with their voice on society? What's the advice you give to them?
I think my biggest advice to them is recognizing what do you need to, like I said to you before, what is it that they need to contribute to the conversation in the business that they're in? And there'll be things that you just don't need to get involved in, or it doesn't align with your industry, which is fine. And it's also allowing yourself or giving yourself permission just to step back a little bit, reflect, understand, learn, and say, do you know what? I don't know about this as much as I'd like to know. So I can't have a conversation as much as I'd like to have this conversation, because I need to go and learn more about this. So I'm not going to comment about this right now. There's other experts and specialists in this community, in this organization, that can comment. But for me, I need to go and learn a little bit more. But we're not vulnerable enough to say that. And it's also okay to say, I don't know. Do you know what? I don't know. But I'll go and find out. And to be honest, I don't think I need to know either, because there's other people who are experts in that space that need to know that.
You can't know everything.
You can't do everything.
Yeah, and you see, and that's a bit of a privilege that we do have as business people. You know, if you're a politician, it's very difficult to say, I don't know. The media is going to crucify you. You know, whereas as a business person, and so we look at these people and say, oh, I can't say that. You know, but as business people, you can say that. You can say, look, I really don't know, you know, but I'm going to think about it. I don't want to blab some nonsense now. So I think that's great advice. But, and Phil, sorry.
So I was just going to say, but even as a politician, you know, I think there would be more trust in politicians if they were a bit more honest and said,
I know,
I need to, you know, this is the area that I look after, education, health, whatever. And they should know about that area that they're looking after. But if they're being asked to comment around the health secretary's new policies and you're in education, I think it's okay to say, you know what, this is their world, and they will give you the answer. But I don't know enough about that space because I'm focusing on that. But they don't. They seem to kind of fumble their way through an answer, make a mistake, and crisis hits generally.
Well, the problem we have is that the health secretary doesn't know anything about health either, but that's another story. Same question to you, Phil. You know, what advice would you give to our vocal future voices in this crazy, difficult, stressful environment?
Well, I think the clue's in the name, really. I think that we've all talked about just come to the table with an authentic voice and don't worry too much about being shot down, because part of it is just share your views. And I think what you've created is an environment where they can do that. And in a way, that's their environment to try and experiment. And in a safe way, that's not going to go on Twitter. And as you said before, when you used to go on Twitter, you used to get good was 60% negativity, wasn't it? Which is just shocking when you think about those stressful environments. And I'm being honest, I kind of look at that and think, because I don't really do Twitter, and that's part of the reason. I just think I don't need that extra stress. I've got enough stress in my life without having that. But I get it for different roles. That's fine. That's different. But I think it's just that we have to be more authentic, more ourselves, be comfortable with that, If we don't know something, then fine. We can't be expected to know everything. And I think that when you do look at the TV and you see these sort of politicians and the like, they are expected to, and they're always waffling around it, aren't they? And usually coming away quite badly from it. But and I think actually you're seeing the media have definitely turned up the dial in terms of the ruthless questioning now, haven't they? And every interviewer is looking for the killer interview all the time. And that's creating quite a toxic culture for people to express themselves more openly and honestly. Because if the interviewer can make them look stupid, they will.
And it's also being aware that you've got a safe space. So, to the vocal point, they've got a great opportunity to be part of that community. But even if you don't belong to vocal or have anything like that, find your safe space. So if you do go for a very hard-hitting interview, for example, you've got people around you who can lift you back up and give you the support that you need, and you will go back out and do it again. And I think it tests you in a way as well, and you shouldn't fear it. I know the interviews that have taken place recently have put the fear in everybody. Like, I don't want to go on local radio station because you're right, they can be a little bit difficult, very difficult. And it's fair questions they were asking, and they were valid to an extent, but it is scary when you're putting your voice out there. So
it is.
Find your safe space.
Yeah, I agree. Find your safe space. And if we're seeing this all the time in the media, then in business, people are going to be more like your old CEO, maybe, where they think, right, I want to make you feel a bit stupid. You should ask that question, So I think we've all got to take heed to that. Yeah,
100%.
So I think we should wrap up there, because we could literally talk all day. Such a privilege to spend time with both of you. You've got so much expertise to bring to this debate, so it's been fantastic. And thank you so much for your time. I'd just like to add as well that we're engaged. We're really proud and privileged to be part of the vocal journey, and really continuing that is exciting to be part of that. And the same with your journey with Comms Rebel. I love creating, if we can help create the inner rebel in everybody, that would be a real achievement. And I think that would help businesses all over the place. So I think with that, sort of we can wrap up, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah, well, if I can just say thank you as well. I mean, what a great conversation we've had, and I tell you, my brain is buzzing. I've got, we've got Inner Rebel, Comms Rebel. We've created collabs. We've got
productive disagreement.
Productive disagreement.
That's great.
I think the really interesting discussion we've had, I think, is the real importance of proper diversity of thought in any communication, but also in any sort of, team and environment. Look, there's just so much to go away and think about here. I've loved it. Thanks very much.
No, thank you. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear. And it's a privilege to be with both of you and hear your expertise, because as a communications professional, I love it. I love understanding your points of views and leaders and what is holding those barriers and blockers. And obviously, if the listeners who are listening to this podcast or watching, any questions, my LinkedIn is always open. I know both of you are very accessible. Questions, thoughts, opinions, I love conversation, and we need to have more of these types of chats. So thank you so much, Phil, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. Juergen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks for listening to Engaged in Conversation. It was presented by our CEO, Phil Wedgwood. For more news and updates on Engage, visit our website at engagesolutionsgroup.com.